All right, guys, look, I'm going to be really blunt with you today, okay? I know it's Halloween, but this is what I want to tell you. So if you got a text message from the Massachusetts Department of Transitional Assistance, these went out this week, by the way. Maybe you did, maybe a friend or a colleague or a family member did, whatever. You know exactly where this video in this situation is going and what we're going to talk about. So the state sent out mass alerts warning that Trump is cutting the SNAP benefits come tomorrow, November 1st, right? This is very, in my opinion, disingenuous because they are telling families that food assistance is about to disappear. This is Trump's fault. This is Republicans' fault. The Republicans are the bad guys and the Republicans are to blame. It's even up on their website, okay? And it explicitly names Trump and basically is pointing the finger. But here's what they're not telling you, okay? This is what they are not telling you. And the reason I wanted to make this video in the first place. So, as you may know, Massachusetts is allegedly, I don't even know if it's there or not after this nonsense or debacle, but we're sitting on like $8 billion in the rainy day fund. $8 billion. And that fund, in my opinion, was literally designed by law for this exact situation. At least that's the way I see it. I could be wrong, and I'm not advocating for this, by the way, but I could be wrong on this, but this is the way it reads to me when I look at these things, and I'm going to quote it directly here. And again, I'm not advocating to do this. I'm just saying I think there's an opportunity to do this, okay? I find it absolutely disgusting that they are pointing the finger at somebody instead of coming up with solutions. Here's what I have the statute here. Here is what it says. It says the Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 29, Section 2H. It says the Commonwealth Stabilization Fund exists to replace the state and local loss of federal funds. Let me say it one more time. Replace the loss of federal funds. So look at it this way. When the feds cut SNAP or when the federal money stops flowing in some way, manner, or form, I would think that there is, again, an opportunity here for the rainy day fund to kick in. That seems to be the entire point of the rainy day fund. And I'm not making this as some kind of suggestion. What I am trying to say is this is not a maybe. The law says this the fund exists for three purposes, okay? Revenue shortfalls, loss of federal funds, and or the event that threatens the health, safety, or welfare of the people. So you're telling me that people not being able to eat does not qualify as a threat to health and welfare? Really? But here's what really bothers me. You know, instead of using the fund, instead of calling an emergency session or some kind of hearing or something, literally doing anything, okay? What does the Healy administration do? What does the legislature do? They send text messages. They update their website, and they point fingers at Washington. They turned this crisis into a campaign ad. That's what they did, and that is the game. That is the game. That's what this is really about. That's the way that I see it. Maybe I'm crazy, but this is the way it looks to me. Because if I were in office, I wouldn't be pointing the finger. I would be trying to figure out solutions to the problem, not adding to the chaos, okay? Because if Massachusetts actually stepped up and covered the gap, if they actually used the rainy day fund the way it's supposed to be used, they'd lose their talking point. That's what it would be. They couldn't blame the Republicans. They couldn't blame Trump anymore. They'd have to govern instead of grandstand. And they'd rather let people panic and starve than solve the problem. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. It really is. Because, again, they'd rather families stress about where their next meal is going to come from than actually solve this problem. And the reason that is, and I honestly believe this, is because I think this is some levels of a political value to them for blaming the other side. I think that blaming the other side is worth more than actually doing something. It's outrageous, guys. It's absolutely outrageous. Let me know if I'm wrong on this. This is the way that I see it, though, okay? Let me do this. Let's think about this for a second. We'll slow down. because I've been doing a lot of thinking about this for the last few days. And again, I am not advocating for them to do this, okay? I'm just saying that there is an opportunity for them to do this, okay? Because they have the money. At least that's the way that I read it. And they also have the legal authority. And even if they don't have the legal authority to use the rainy day fund, change the freaking rules, man. Change the rules, amend the rules, get some sort of temporary measure in place and figure it out. Why does it have to be this freaking complicated? Okay? Why does it have to be this complicated? They have the mechanisms in place to fix this today. They had the mechanisms to fix this weeks ago, and they'd rather choose not to because it's better politics to let it burn, all right? And it gets worse. And you want to know why it gets worse? You want to know why? Here's something absolutely wild that I also read, okay? And this, again, I've been reading on this for obviously a couple days now. So Massachusetts has a 14.9% SNAP enrollment rate. That means nearly 15% of the state is on food stamps. But our poverty rate, it's at 10%. So when I'm looking at these two numbers, let me get this straight here. If I'm looking at these two numbers, and again, maybe I'm wrong here. I am not an expert on SNAP, but this is the way I see it. We have 50% more people on SNAP than we actually have people living in poverty. Think about this. Really, think about this for a second. For every 10 people in poverty in Massachusetts, there are 15 people that are getting food stamps. The math is not mathing here, okay? Nothing is adding up, which leads me to believe that we are either counting poverty wrong, or we are enrolling people who aren't actually in need. Or alternatively, we've made it so easy to stay on the program that the people who climbed out of poverty are still collecting the benefits. Do you see what I'm saying here? The numbers are not adding up. And if you compare that, this is the other thing. You also have to, when you look at these things, okay, you can't just look at it from a one-dimensional perspective. You have to see what is going on in other states as well. Of course, I did this. So Vermont has a poverty rate of around 10%. They also have a 10% SNAP rate. This matches. Connecticut, it's pretty much the same thing. It's a 10 for 10. 10% poverty, 10% SNAP. Washington, Virginia, New Jersey, they all pretty much line up. They're all pretty much identical. So their SNAP enrollment roughly equals their poverty rate, which I would think makes a lot of sense, right? Like you'd expect people to be getting food stamps or assistance that are in poverty. But in Massachusetts, again, we are at 15%. We are above where we should be. So I don't know if we've inflated the rolls, and I'm not exactly sure if this is an accident, by the way, but we are an outlier here. We're an outlier. That's what this is. And I'm not sure if this is within the state auditor's wheelhouse, but if you want to send this video to her, you very well can. I might too. But I'm calling this out right now. Diana, if this is in your wheelhouse, I think that this is something that needs to be looked at, because I don't think this is happening by accident. And here's why, okay? After COVID, the SNAP enrollment here, everywhere, it exploded nationwide, okay? In 2019, the program cost about $60 billion. By 2021, it was around $114 billion. And even now, in 2025, we are still sitting at $106 billion, which is roughly 50% higher than pre-COVID numbers, even after adjusting for some levels of inflation. So I think Massachusetts kept people enrolled. I'm not saying this is a fact, but this is the way it looks to me. I think Massachusetts kept people enrolled and they didn't tighten the eligibility or something, or they didn't transition people off of the emergency portion of this. They've effectively kept the spigot open. That's what happened. But now all of a sudden, now they're in shock that the bill is coming due. You know, let me get this straight, okay? Let me get this straight. The state created a dependency. They inflated enrollment beyond what poverty rates justify. They kept people on the rolls long after COVID. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is they didn't do anything after the people were already on these benefits, which could have resulted in more money. And now that the federal funding is pulling back, they're acting like victims instead of taking responsibility. They built this system. They should own it. And furthermore, You have $8 billion sitting in a fund designed exactly for this moment. You figure if there's 1 million people on SNAP, what is that? It's like $240 million this month that they would have to use. So use it. Or admit that you rather score political points and feed people. That's what's happening. Am I wrong here? I don't think I am. I'm certainly not 100% wrong. Because here is the thing, and this is what drives me up a wall. Okay, Massachusetts politics, this state we always have money for pet projects, okay? But when there's an actual emergency, when federal funds, they are disappearing and people suddenly need help, suddenly we're broke, okay? Suddenly we're broke. Suddenly it's Trump's fault. Suddenly the $8 billion in the rainy day fund does not count. You know what the rainy day fund has been used for in the past? Do you have any idea? The COVID pandemic. They pulled over, it was like $2.4 billion or something like that back in 2021 for a pandemic response. This was deemed a threat to public health and public welfare. They used it for revenue shortfalls during the 2008 recession. They've tapped this fund multiple times over decades for exactly these kind of situations. But now there's absolute silence. They just had, I'm not going to pull it up. They just had, I think GBH or somebody within the last 12 hours released a report that they're not going to use the rainy day fund for some ridiculous reason why. So, you know, there's no emergency session. There's no committee on ways and means. There's no hearings. There's no analysis on how to deploy the fund, just text messages and finger pointing. By the time it took them to send all those text messages, even if they used a CRM or whatever, everybody's in a database, and update the website, they probably could have figured out half of this problem and figured out a way to try to support these people that need it, okay? Healy ain't missing no meal. No freaking way, man. Healy ain't missing no meal. The legislature isn't going to miss a meal. They're not worried about grocery money. It's the families who've been told to depend on the system that the state encouraged them to stay on in the first place, who are going to get crushed. This is what modern progressive government looks like when you strip away all of the rhetoric. It is not about helping people. It's about keeping them dependent when it's in your benefit, okay? It's about the optics. It's about who gets blamed or who they get to blame. It's about maintaining a narrative that the other side is evil while your side is helpless. That is what they're portraying right now. How is it possible that a hungry family is a better talking point than a solved problem? You want to know why? Here's why. Because fear drives votes. Put on your tinfoil hat, okay? But fear drives votes. Because if people aren't panicking about Trump cutting their benefits, they might start asking why Massachusetts never prepared for this despite having the time to prepare and the billions in reserves to use. You see what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? This is the truth, okay? This is the way that I see it, all right? So here's my question. If the rainy day fund, if it's not for this, and I want somebody, if somebody in the legislature wants to answer this, you very well can. Send it to them. If the rainy day fund isn't for this type of situation, okay, then what the hell is it for? Really? If losing federal funding for food assistance doesn't count as an emergency, what the hell does? How bad does it have to get before the state actually uses the tool it created for this exact purpose? Really? What does it have to be? I mean, wasn't this designed to help people? Really? Or is it just like perpetuating itself? Is it for solving a crisis or manufacturing them for an electoral advantage? That's what I think this is. Massachusetts has spent decades building their image, building this image of itself as a compassionate state, as a state of empathy, the progressive beacon, the place that cares about everybody, okay? That cares about the vulnerable. And when the moment comes to prove it, when this moment comes, when there's an actual potential crisis and people need actual help, they'd rather send text messages and blame somebody else. It's outrageous. It's really outrageous. That tells you everything that you need to know about the state's priorities. I think that the auditor needs to look at the SNAP program, okay? I need her to look at the SNAP program. Again, if that's in her wheelhouse, all right? It's a federal program, so this may be beyond her scope of work. But at the very least, somebody needs to do something. At the very least, somebody needs to do something. And again, I'm not advocating to use the rainy day fund for this. But what I am saying is that I think that the legislature and the Healy administration has every single opportunity to provide relief to the people that need it. And I think that the rainy day fund is a perfect example of a mechanism that they could use in order to feed these people that need to eat. Okay? It's outrageous, guys. It's absolutely outrageous. It really is. It's unbelievable that they are using this as some kind of political talking point or some kind of political grandstanding instead of helping people. Instead of getting interviewed by all of the news stations and writing all of these articles and taking the emails and taking the text messages and taking the phone calls, solve the problem. I don't care if the rainy day fund was not intended for this use. To me, it looks that way. As I said earlier, I'm not going to reiterate what I said, but I want to touch on this one more time. If the rainy day fund, if there's a gray area that could potentially be exploited to use it for this, I would think this is the perfect time to do it. And if there is no gray area to exploit, then amend it, okay? Put together a temporary amendment for the month of November that'll fund the SNAP benefits, okay? That's what I think. Maybe, and as I'm sitting here and thinking, I don't want to make this video too long for you guys, but as I'm sitting here and thinking, I'm thinking to myself, maybe they're doing this on purpose, like other than the political talking points on a local level or a state level, maybe what they're doing is they're doing this on purpose to put more pressure on the Republican Party to concede in regards to the package that's resulting in the government shutdown. That's the only possible, like, think about this logically, okay? This isn't, I don't think when it comes to this stuff and laws and rules and all these other things, these things aren't actually that complicated, okay? They're not that complicated. And what I think they're doing here, and again, maybe this is another tinfoil hat situation. I'm sorry if it is, guys. I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist here. I'm trying to collaborate with you guys and maybe get your side of the story. But to me, I feel like this would give a political advantage to the Democratic Party to put the blame on Trump or the Republican Party that people are not going to be able to eat food in November or not get their SNAP benefits in November as a way to gain leverage. Okay, as a way to gain leverage, because otherwise, why would they just not figure out a mechanism that we already have in place and the money allegedly to help? It doesn't make any sense to me. It really doesn't make any sense to me. Please send this over to the state auditor. Maybe send this over to Leah Foley or somebody. I will too. Somebody needs to look at the SNAP program, because you can't have 15% of people on SNAP but have a 10% poverty rate. These things do not add up. The math does not add up here. So anyway, guys, that's it for today's video. Sorry I'm so frustrated on Halloween, but it is what it is. I needed to get this out there. And that's my opinion. Hopefully, the federal government could figure this out before the end of the day. I think they're having a hearing on it or a meeting or whatever the hell they're doing. And we'll see where it goes. But that's it. I'll see you on the next one. Have a good weekend. I'll probably be back on Monday. Bye-bye.